My name's Kurt Hansen. I am a publisher of Rain and Radio and Internet Newsletter, and I'm glad you're here. And since you are such a great bunch and are so thrilled to see each other in the rooms, you should give yourself a round of applause for how cool you are. So, excellent way to begin. We are really thrilled. We have this is, I think, our 20th roughly Rain Summit. We have been doing them, as many of you know, for almost a decade every spring in Las Vegas. This is I think our fourth or fifth radio show conference. We've done a couple in Canada, a couple in Europe, a couple at Conclave. So sooner or later we're going to do it right, and this is going to be the one. We have a great agenda today. It features a lot of good panels and presentations, including a keynote by David Field, the CEO of Entercom Communications. We've got a research presentation on internet radio by the ad agency Group M Next. We've got a very wide and distinguished speaker list with broadcasters from Saga and Univision and Greater Media and Clear Channel and other broadcasters, plus some online pure play webcasters like Pandora and Slacker and Songza are all here. And outside of webcasters, we've got executives from Ford and Pioneer and the global ad agency OMD. So it should be a terrific day. As many of you know, we've also got some changes you read about today going on at Rain that we're pleased with. We're combining Rain and Rain Summits under the expert leadership of Jennifer Lane, who many of you know and met earlier today. She'll take over as CEO of both companies. Paul Maloney, who's been doing a great job being executive editor of Rain for the last 13 years, has been splitting his duties with programming AccuRadio, so he's going to move full-time to AccuRadio. And then we have a new managing editor of Rain, Brad Hill, who I think is just walking in right now. And hello, Brad. Let's give Brad a round of applause. And I hope you'll all have a chance to meet Brad before the day's over. Our friend John Guerin, who is CEO of AccuRadio, will be here to introduce a couple of the panels. Thanks, John. And we want to thank all the sponsors who made Rain Summits possible, especially our two platinum sponsors, Triton Digital and Secure Net Systems. So thank you, guys. And one more round of applause because they put in some good money to make this happen for you. Air conditioning and everything. So if you're on the first panel, if you're one of the speakers, come on stage. And I'll... Our neat thing about Rain Summits is we try and keep them right on schedule, and we have a little clock here, so if you see the yellow light, I think that's the 2-minute warning, and if you see the red light going, you can start clearing your throat and making loud noises and letting the speakers know that they're out of time. So that's the organizational plan. This panel is... We'll explore platforms and strategies that drive incremental revenues for streaming audio companies, including performance-based and direct response campaigns and exchanges and daily deals and more. Our moderator, Paul Heine, has covered radio and media and music for industry-leading publications since 1985. He's currently senior editor of Inside Radio and a contributor to Billboard magazine. He was previously senior editorial management positions at Radio and Records, Billboard Radio Monitor, and FMQB, and has reported for Media Week, Billboard, and Hollywood Reporter. He's appeared on the Today Show and Fox News, and has been quoted in the New York Times and Entertainment Weekly, and the LA Times and the Boston Globe, and more. So here to introduce the panel, Paul Heine.
All right. Thank you, Kurt. Welcome, everybody, to Rain Summit Orlando. We're thrilled to be opening the conference. As the opening act, it's our job to warm you guys up for the main event, which is the digital ad insertion mud wrestling extravaganza. That'll be taking place in a little while. Those of you in the front row may want to get out your protective eye gears because it could be a little messy during that one, but we're going to keep it relatively clean. We're here to talk about alternative revenue strategies. And you know, marketers are looking to go well beyond just audio spot advertising. They're looking for innovative new ways to interact or to engage consumers with their products and brands. And that's great news for everybody in the streaming audio space because digital offers so many creative ways to help clients build their brands and move products. So to kick off the summit, we're going to be talking about some of those alternative revenue strategies. We've got a very diverse panel with different perspectives on the topic. Starting down on your right, Ted Gurley oversees digital sales for Univision Radio in the U.S. and Puerto Rico. He's been involved in broadcast and digital sales management for over 25 years, with experience in radio, TV, and cable sales strategy. Now, Ted also was the co-author of one of the first books about music in the digital space. It's entitled Plug In, The Guide to Music on the Net. Can you still get it on Amazon?
Right, for about 25 cents.
25 cents, such a deal. That book foreshadowed today's streaming and social landscape. Univision Radio VP of Digital Sales, Ted Gurley. So moving down, we have Daniel Anstandig. He's the CEO and founder of LDR Interactive. The company's listener-driven radio systems power interactive broadcasts on over 300 stations and networks around the globe, where listeners control live programming. Daniel's background includes work with some of the world's leading broadcasters and publishers on digital content and sales strategy. LDR Interactive's Daniel Anstandig. Okay, so the next gentleman, after starting in local broadcast radio, Matt Cutair joined Dial Global Radio Networks in 2004 to work in national and digital sales. And after a 2-year stint with Pandora, he returned to Dial Global as VP of Digital Operations and Sales in 2012, where he's expanded the network's digital footprint through external partnerships with digital audio companies and has built out an internal digital content division. And in case you've been living on planet Vulcan, Star Trek reference for Kurt, for the past few weeks, Dial Global has been renamed Westwood One and is being acquired by Cumulus Media. So it's Westwood One, Matt Cutair. And last but not least, Dan Weiner spent nearly 20 years in media sales and operational management, including positions at Clear Channel, CBS Radio, and Fox Interactive Media. In 2010, he joined Pandora to run sales for the Western region. And Dan's media and management experience includes recruiting, building, and managing ad sales teams and selling cross-platform marketing programs with expertise in radio, online, mobile, out-of-home, and sports and event marketing. So it's Pandora's Dan Weiner. All right, we got the introductions out of the way. So in its broadest sense, alternative revenue means alternative clients, right? Using digital to attract new advertisers who haven't been using broadcast radio, so that radio is bringing new clients on board or tapping into the digital budgets of existing clients. So Daniel, I want to start with you. Which advertiser categories are you finding to be the strongest early adopters for your clients' digital products?
Well, interestingly, I think that the word or the phrase alternative revenue or non-traditional revenue for most broadcasters has meant taking products that are outside of broadcast spot inventory and going to our same clients over and over again. So I would say that if you look at the track record of most broadcasters, most of their revenue right now in NTR categories are coming from advertisers or sponsors who are already affiliated with those properties. However, at LDR, we create systems that stations use to create interactive programming. So listeners can drive broadcast programming in real time by essentially creating this new platform on mobile and desktop where they take control, they interact with what's happening on the air. And outside of that, we have a number of other features, whether it's display advertising or audio pre-rolls, social marketing, or direct messaging, that we try to create a different kind of offering outside of broadcast spot inventory that would attract a different kind of client that is outside of the broadcast realm. So we encourage our clients to go far beyond the typical buyers who they're affiliated with today. And we've seen in particular, in home improvement, in telco, we've seen clients that have started to adopt technology or adopt campaigns with broadcasters that in most other situations would not be buying broadcast spot inventory. So a couple of quick stats that I'd like to share just related to that. I was talking with somebody earlier, Rocky Thomas from AdsWiz, and we were talking about the nature of most of the inventory that runs today on streaming or on digital, in terms of digital inventory. And as we were comparing notes, we noticed that about 80% of the revenue that comes out of streaming in particular comes from maybe the same top 5 buyers. And compliments to them, they're visionaries and they do a great job of really moving their product and moving their marketing messages in a new way beyond broadcast. But I think that as an industry where we can focus more effectively and where we can grow more alternative revenue is to use systems like intelligent ad replacement or to use some of the new inventory that we have beyond spots and beyond audio streaming to go reach out to clients that otherwise don't really know about us.
Great, thank you, Daniel. So we heard about home improvement and telco. Anybody else have any categories that they're seeing really strong traction in terms of digital ad sales?
I mean, I would say that some of the major traditional radio categories are certainly jumping in. Feet first. Retail has grown dramatically over the last couple of years, and I think that will continue as we move forward. It's just logical that as internet radio is being consumed in environments that traditional radio has always been consumed in, like in the car closest to point of purchase, that advertisers who want to reach consumers in those environments will follow them there. So retail, I would say entertainment's a category that traditionally hadn't been a big one for us in traditional radio that has performed really well in online radio, and a lot of that has to do with the targetability, the short flights for tune-in campaigns and stuff like that digital radio can do really effectively.
Client-branded online stations have really become a hot button for advertisers that are looking to move beyond just a spot campaign and integrate their message directly into the content. We've seen them with Macy's, with Pepsi, Walmart, and other major brands. Dan, you've done them at Pandora. What's it take to have the right marriage of the brand and the online station so that they deliver value for both the client and the listener?
Well, I think for starters, you got to make sure the client's committed to brand, because unfortunately so many radio advertisers are pretty driven by weekly sales. So just because we have an expression that just because we can doesn't mean we should. And branded radio is one of those examples of it's a great way to create engagement with your customer base in a branded environment where in some respects it's the only advertiser the listener's exposed to. But you got to be in it for the long haul. You need to cross promote it. So if you're going to create the sounds of Pepsi, then Pepsi's got to be willing to promote the unique URL on its other media and make it all sort of cross-pollinated. Otherwise, it can fall short like anything. It's got to be, the branded radio is almost like driving tune-in for an entertainment advertiser. You got to create awareness for it, and you got to message the right way. But you also have to understand that it's not necessarily going to drive case sales in a cause and effect way unless you're putting some special code on it and there's a call to action and all that other jazz.
So more part of an integrated campaign and a branding campaign. And you mentioned Pepsi, and Ted, at Univision, you built a branded station for Pepsi. How involved was the client in programming the station? And what do you see as some of the do's and don'ts of branded online radio stations?
So Dan is absolutely correct. The client has to be committed. They came to us back in February at the beginning of the year and said that they had a goal of reaching Hispanics when they're having celebrations and gatherings. The station is branded as Juntos for celebrations, gatherings. And we had a general idea of what they wanted to accomplish. We brought to them an idea of utilizing a mobile platform, utilizing a branded station, designing a specific web space for them. And one of their rules of engagement is it had to be able to be promoted across multiple platforms so they could use it on Azteca Television or Entravision or other non-Univision brands. The client was very involved from the get-go. They made themselves very accessible. The agency at times had their goals and objectives. The client had their goals and objectives. And of course, we were trying to herd the cats, which is a very typical place that media finds itself when you're trying to design something like this. But the client was extremely engaged. We used one of our music specialist is Mar Santa Cruz, who's VP of Content. So we image that station, very similar to how we image our top-ranked stations in the market. And really got underneath their tent a little bit on who is this customer, who are you trying to reach, what is the dial that you're trying to turn out there. And it was a very, what I would term as sophisticated textbook level diagnosis and diagnostic session with the client. We then vetted those playlists and gave them opportunities to fine-tune that list for various events that they would have throughout the year. As Dan said, it is a long-term commitment. Their commitment with us is a 12-month experience that they're involved in, and it's one really they're involved in from top to bottom.
So it sounds like this is something that works best on a national level with a major brand like a Pepsi or a Walmart. But can it be done on a local level? Is that possible, do you think? Anybody have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's the same principle, just commitment level, just making sure that, you know, we're identifying that customer's KPIs and making sure that if they're in line with what that product can accomplish, then yeah, then you know, you have to have the scale on the local level to pull it off and have it make impact, but you can totally do it. And we have. I mean, we've got, you know, there's Indian casinos that want to create a soundtrack of their, you know, of their property, and they use music a lot to define that. The Cosmopolitan Hotel in Las Vegas is another example of that. So you can do it.
So I think in some respects, local direct clients or regional buyers are actually more open to looking at non-traditional products and to looking at systems like ours. At LDR, we have over $4 million built in local radio markets just around display, audio, social, and direct messaging as a unique kind of offering for a local marketer. And I don't know that that could be done the same way on a national level in our situation, because on a national level you have buyers who are looking for very specific parameters around their marketing, and they're used to buying in a very quantitative, transactional kind of a setting in most cases. And so I think that, you know, in our case, we've seen local direct or regional buyers really adopt or be open to different ways of marketing first, ironically. But I do think that organizations like Pandora, Westwood One, Univision have scale in a way that goes, you know, far beyond a local market to start getting more national marketers and advertisers involved in digital media or involved in different ways of marketing through broadcast.
All right, well, it's September, so we got to talk football, and specifically something called Players Playlists, which allows fans to hear the songs that their favorite football players listen to get pumped up for the game. It's something that Matt and his team at Westwood One cooked up, and like everything today, it has revenue attached to it. So, Matt, can you talk a bit about Players Playlists, how it works, and why it's effective?
Sure. I think the reason that it's been effective for us is that it really started as a content piece that would add value, in this case, to an NFL radio broadcast that we do over AM and FM and satellite radio. You know, it's not something that was put together specifically to be a sales vehicle. It was really put together to create value for listeners. And I'm sure a lot of folks in this room watch football on television, and there's like 900 pregame shows now on television, so you probably catch one or two of them each week. And you probably have seen the shots that they typically show of players getting off the team bus, walking into the stadium, or players who are on the field during the game, or before the game, getting ready to play. 9 times out of 10, these players have headphones on. It's a natural part of their pregame routine to be listening to music. Music is very synergistic with the game experience from a tailgating perspective for fans, as an example. So what we wanted to do was simply to explore that connection between music and sports and create value for our listeners by letting them consume stations that have been curated by their favorite players, telling us what it is that they're listening to while they get ready to play. So every week we talk to players, and we take a few minutes out of the time that we spend with them and don't talk about X's and O's and strategy. We just ask them what it is that they are actually listening to when we see them in those situations. And they're more than happy to share. It's great content. It lives online. And then from an advertising perspective, becomes a true multi-platform play. You as an advertiser are able to own the content itself, the player's playlist feature. That includes on-air. We play some of the songs from the player's playlist that week as we go back into the broadcast. And then we have our talent talk about it. And during that conversation, we can obviously promote a brand. We drive people back to the web. In this case, we have partnered with a site called 8Tracks, where you can actually listen to the playlists. When you're listening to those playlists, the entire experience can be owned by the brand. Skin page, ad units, pre-roll audio, et cetera. And then there's a social component to promoting who's this week's players' playlists. So there's a lot of different ways as a brand that you're able to sort of own that content wherever it lives. But I think the key thing is that it really adds value to the broadcast, and it's something that listeners are automatically going to be interested in because they're fans of the NFL and fans of these players, and this is sort of this oddball entertainment type side of sports that people want to engage with.
Yeah, that's really cool because it creates new online content rather than repurposing what you can already hear over the air, which is one of the challenges that broadcast radio has, so kudos to you for that. Hey, Dan, Pandora is a streaming audio company, but one of its fastest growing revenue streams is video. And the demand for video is just growing like crazy, but there's inventory limitations, right? So you have a video everywhere program. Can you talk a little bit about that, how it works, what kind of results you're seeing, and what you're seeing in terms of demand?
Yeah, I mean, the video everywhere product specifically is designed for local advertisers. It kind of goes after the local advertiser who's looking for an extension of their cable campaign and wouldn't maybe think to include Pandora in that mix. But the fact of the matter is we've got a pretty robust amount of video that's available, and it's a really good product because it's peak moment of engagement. It only serves when someone is interacting with the player, so they change a station or they skip a song, and it can render a video ad. And so for us, it's just another way to create media impressions at a local market level, and be less interested in what the product is, but more interested in, you have an audience you're trying to target, you have an overall strategy. Let's figure out how to act tactically against that strategy. And sometimes it's not just selling them audio. There's a lot of other ways to reach unique users. And I think that video has been a big part of our push, for sure.
Great. Anybody else using video that can talk about the demand and how it's successful in terms of generating alternative revenue?
So the demand in today's world is extremely high. We can sell out of pre-roll opportunities pretty quickly. We need to, as a publisher, create opportunities to have engaging video. And at the same point, we are a audio experience, and we don't expect that individual to be interacting all the time at the desktop or with their mobile device. So it's a little bit of a fine line of integrating that video into that audio experience. That's one of the things that we're trying to do with Euphoria, which I can talk about later. But the integration of video and audio will play into that entertainment experience. The demand is currently outstripping the supply.
Well, that's a good thing. You mentioned Euphoria, which is Univision's new streaming audio platform. They rebranded and relaunched it earlier this year. It's really cool. In addition to their over-the-air radio stations, they have digital-only stations that cover formats that you can't hear on the air, like El Sancho, which is an alternative regional Mexican. I don't think you can get that over the air in too many cities. They've brought other companies on board too. Emis has its two big stations, Hot 97 in New York and Power 106 in Los Angeles, streaming on Euphoria. So your digital audience has grown dramatically, as Triton has documented over the last several months since the relaunch. What revenue success are you seeing at Euphoria at this early juncture?
So first of all, Euphoria is a rebrand. It's a real commitment from Univision as a company to be providing a connection for the Hispanic audience of audio entertainment opportunities. And fortunately, with radio, we're able to take that to market. We've seen a lot of advertiser interest in getting involved with that platform. The audience has been very responsive. El Sancho, as you said, is one of our top ranked stations. It is a internet-only radio station. In fact, it was so successful that we took that format and actually launched a station in Austin with the El Sancho format last week. That launched on Monday in Austin. The revenue success, we have to keep up with the demand, with the increasing impressions. We've had extremely high growth from an audience standpoint over the past 6 months. The product just launched in iOS in late April, early May. It launches in Android, and we anticipate even higher growth. But from a revenue success standpoint, we find that advertisers are baking it into their plan, their execution with their traditional radio. And also we have advertisers that are looking at the platform as a internet-only play, ranging from small market, little bar in Albuquerque that's promoting happy hours on the platform to some bigger pure audio plays that we're getting from digital-only shops. So to answer your question, the buzz is creating and helping create the demand.
Great. Now, in terms of like year-over-year growth, where you are now versus where you were a year ago, can you kind of characterize that for us in terms of a percentage or just how much growth you've seen?
From January of this year through last week or so, about 100+%, 104% in audience growth in overall streaming sessions, listening hours.
And in terms of revenue, is that keeping pace?
Well, as VP of Sales, my goal is to make it keep pace, and we are on a rapid growth. There is that delta between the growth that we're achieving in revenue and the gap between the audience growth. But fortunately, we feel that we have a very small delta.
Great, great. Well, that gap exists for a lot of companies, so you're not alone there. I want to move on to another hot button topic for advertisers, and that's automated ad buying. In January, Xaxis Radio Xaxis, the ad agency, launched Xaxis Radio, which is an automated agency trading desk, the first one for streaming audio advertising. And it's a partnership with Triton Digital's A2X ad exchange. So yes, it's welcome to the machine. Programmatic buying. Anybody on the panel that's part of A2X that can talk about what kind of success you're seeing and what you've learned about how to use an ad exchange effectively?
We're part of it. I think it's too early to tell right now. I think that several things have to happen in the marketplace, which is primarily have a standard for audio tagging, audio tracking. In today's world, we are getting a very small amount of revenue from A2X. It's, I think, a visionary product from Triton, and I believe that there is going to be a place for it, but it's not there yet. But once audio tracking and those standards are accepted in the industry and by ad agencies so that they get the accountability that they're looking for with their delivery, that there will be a place for it.
So do you sort of cordon off a certain number of impressions for A2X and reserve premium inventory for reservation-based sales? Or how do you sort of divide up the inventory?
A2X is a demand side. It is acquiring inventory on demand as needed from us. So we are providing an API or open source for them to acquire that inventory. There is no discussion. It is just an open part of that relationship that we have with Triton.
That happens in real time, right?
It is in real time.
Great.
Correct.
I will say I have to compliment, any platform or any team that wants to tackle that territory. That's been a really gritty side of our business for a long time. And in my prior life before LDR as a consultant for a number of broadcasters, we looked at a lot of automated platforms and a lot of transactional relationship systems where you could place buys on a great scale across properties for radio inventory, for digital inventory among broadcasters. And it's treacherous to coordinate among an industry that really doesn't have a great set automated standard to traffic inventory the way that a Facebook or a Google or any pure play operator would. So, we're probably in the very early stages of those kinds of platforms, but I think it's great for our industry, and I think that the way that, again, those kinds of systems can be used to grow our industry overall is to go for the long tail of buyers. Go meet buyers and go meet advertisers who don't have exposure to radio because they wouldn't get a visit from a radio rep, or their buy may not even be worth the time of a high-scale radio rep, where they can instead get into the streaming business or get into marketing in an unconventional way.
Hey, in a bit, we're going to open it up for questions on the floor, so if you've got any, give some thought to them. In a couple minutes, we'll find Jennifer with a roving microphone, and she'll find you, and you can ask your question. But I want to talk a bit about events, live local events. I mean, they've been part of broadcast radio's toolkit for decades, and their advertisers love them now more so than ever. They want to be integrated into events whenever possible. And online radio is able to put a new twist on them. So Dan, you're doing some local events with Pandora. How are you using them to differentiate Pandora from your competitors and get a larger piece of your clients' ad budgets?
Yeah, it's definitely the oldest trick in the book, right? We've been doing events to show proof of performance for years, and as we start to transact with more local advertisers and traditional radio customers, they want us to help engage on a one-to-one basis with their audience and their customer base. So what we're doing that's a little bit different is taking advantage of the database that Pandora has. So if we do an event in Los Angeles for a brand, let's say Jeep, and we're also going to do another event for Jeep in Atlanta, we're going to actually use the genome, and we're going to look at who is a really hot, trending artist in Los Angeles based on the amount of thumbs, based on the geography that you define as the trading zone. And once you eliminate, the Britney Spears and the Untouchables, that you're probably not going to get to do a localized event, you find some really cool emerging artists, like a Macklemore we found was trending big time in Texas, and we were able to get Macklemore to do an event 2 years before, now the guy's on the Grammys. And it's the same thing. So an event in Los Angeles will be based on, which emerging artist is starting to really trend and where we can get them at a reasonable price. And it's going to be probably a different act and a totally different genre than, say, Atlanta, which Atlanta had a hip-hop artist. I think in LA it was an alternative rock artist. But that's the wrinkle. We're sort of hedging our bet, making sure that we have a really successful artist that everyone would like. And then the other wrinkle to that is that we actually invite those listeners, because we know that you've thumbed up a station with Macklemore, you've seeded a station with Macklemore, you've thumbed up his music somewhere in your listening pattern, and you live nearby. So so those people get the invitation. Jeep or advertiser A, whatever it's going to be, they get the halo of inviting you to a really personalized, cool, free show. And then once you're there, it's sort of the same type of an event that anyone probably is doing in this room.
Are you weaving clients in, and roughly how many events would you say you do a year on the local level?
Someone just told me that we last quarter did 35 local events, which to me seems like a lot of events for a company that wasn't doing anything, didn't even have an event staff, and was hiring out 16 months ago. So I think we're doing it. So if we're averaging 30 last quarter, that number is going to continue to get bigger. I mean, we're in 29 markets right now, so that's going to put more pressure on the company to come up with an events crew that can handle the demand.
And are clients integral to this, sort of, so they get the brand association with the hot up-and-coming artists?
Oh, yeah. I mean, there was a time when we were doing these as sort of open houses just to kind of get closer to our audience. And we're still doing that, but these events I'm talking about, we're actually using the data to select the artists and using the data to invite the customer. That's all pretty much subsidized by brands, by different advertisers. And those range from, you know, the common people that you expect, someone who wants a car display, right, the auto guys. But it's also, you know, the Amazons of the world who are selling books and are totally data geeks and don't really believe in radio, quite frankly, and we're getting them to see that there is value in audio. If you don't believe in radio, at least look at this, because this is all data. You can define the zip codes that encompass a typical college campus, and you can give them a book offer and get them excited to buy their books from Amazon instead of going to the school bookstore, and use a concert as an incentive to get them fired up. And that's talk about new revenue streams. That's a new advertiser for audio as well.
Terrific. Anyone have a question in the audience? We've got about 3 minutes left. Yes, the gentleman up front. Kurt with the microphone. Awesome.
Hi, Nick Sakani here with Secure and a question. I have a question for Daniel, if I may. First of all, we do appreciate your insights in non-traditional advertising. We at Secure and Systems have found that local advertisers are much more likely to embrace non-traditional venues and methods of advertising than national brands. Question for you is, what would you say the primary reason for the national advertisers to not willing to embrace alternative advertising would be? Would it be a hesitation as far as the potential revenue, or a lack of comprehension of the technology? Any further insights would be appreciated.
Well, I think on a local level, you're dealing with a different type of buyer. You're dealing with a buyer who's looking for a unique experience for a consumer that guides them into that business or that makes them a loyal customer. And it's not that that's not true of a national buyer or a national sponsor, but in most cases, national media buys or partnerships like the ones that you've heard about today are organized by agencies that have a very tight leash, or maybe self-imposed very tight leash, around the way that they can measure a campaign and the way that they can buy a campaign. So they're looking for very specific measurable points that sometimes do and sometimes don't exist when you're looking at a new marketing vehicle like ours at LDR, or I would venture to say most of the vehicles that you've heard about today. So I think in many cases our success comes from local direct buyers and regional buyers. And Tracy Gilliam from Top Line Matters, who is in the audience today, works with us and our clients very hands-on in developing revenue, and has, I think, the most success when we encounter a local buyer who doesn't have to have an experience in buying radio, but who has a real focus on driving a unique experience or reaching a consumer in a way that they didn't expect, and doing that in a way beyond broadcast spots. And that's just received differently with a local business or a regional business, I think, than it is nationally right now, and mostly unexplainably, until we get into I think better measurement and more systems that can really kind of set parameters around some of these alternative revenue streams.
What I would add to that is, I think if you just think about national business, it's naturally much more bureaucratic. Yes. There's a lot more people involved in the process. So it's really incumbent upon us to change our approach. We have to talk to more people along the chain. We have to educate. We have to evangelize better at different levels. And we have to just, quite frankly, sell better. Because it is harder because of the bureaucracy. On the local side of it, you might be talking to the ultimate decision maker. There might be one or two ultimate decision makers. Well, in the national business, there's a chain of folks, and you've got to make sure that you're covering that off. So I think bureaucracy is a big part of it, but that's incumbent upon us to fix.
Yeah, definitely.
How are we doing on time? Are we done? Or do we have more? One more question. Who in the audience has a question? Anyone? Not, I've got one.
Tracy,
okay.
No questions?
Someone?
I have a question for Pandora. Can I ask a question?
Of course.
So I'm curious. I have a question. So I'm curious about the buyers that you find most receptive. If you're going in with something unconventional from Pandora, who's the decision maker that you talk to most?
Well, first off, everything is unconventional when Pandora walks into the room, and it's gotten a lot better thanks to guys like Triton Media, who can create some sort of quantitative measurement, and ultimately, more importantly than anything, it's just results. And when we're able to quantify results, I think that's helped pave the way. But
Radio buyer?
all you know what's really clients. Clients drive everything. I think 3 years ago Pandora was it was even more confusing than it probably is today. But is it national? Is it local? Is it radio? Or is it digital? Or is it mobile? We're running a lot of different businesses. So for us, ultimately the best way to address it is to find the person at the brand who is ultimately responsible for success or failure more so than anyone, and make some sort of connection with that person, and then be a part of the solution, right? Get in the room with the agency and say, look, you have a client who's got an appetite to do something different. There's more pressure than ever on ROI. We need to be open to what we can and can't do. There are some measurements that we can do that doesn't exist today in radio. Then there are others that have been around in radio forever and are not completely linear and can't totally translate into an internet radio space, not just a Pandora. But I think that there's a lot of politics inside of agencies. There are silos that need to come down, just like there are in radio companies, and just like there are in brands. So, but ultimately, I think when we have had our most success, things that we can scale and we can repeat, it comes from identifying a client who has something that's keeping them up at night and coming back with a solution that we can implement, whether we implement it through the digital team, the radio team, or both.
All right, I think we are out of time. I want to thank our panel for not only providing such great answers, but also great questions. Thank you, Daniel. That's good. Don't see that too often. I love that. Ted Gurley, Daniel Anstandig, Matt Cutair, and Dan Weiner. Thank you so much.